What a man thinks when he sees that your dignity is stronger than your love for him is not pretty, not tender, and not pleasant. It's devastating to his ego, because here he doesn't just lose affection, he loses position. This video doesn't exist to comfort you or inflate your self-esteem. It exists to show you the exact psychological mechanism that activates when he discovers he can no longer have you at any price. And when that happens, nothing feels the same for either of you. Here, you'll hear the 6 real mental stages his mind goes through when your dignity prevails, from initial confusion to inner breakdown to the point where the dynamic reverses forever. If you leave before the end, you'll miss the most dangerous and decisive part, the one that separates the woman who gives in again from the woman who will never be taken for granted again. This isn't just any content. It's the message you need to hear in full if you don't want to lose yourself again for love. Carl Jung warned that no one confronts another human being without first confronting their own shadow. And that's exactly what happens here. Your dignity forces him to see what he'd avoided looking at within himself. If any of this already resonates deep within you, subscribe and write "I'm reading" in the comments. That way YouTube understands this reflection deserves to reach further, because if you hear it at the right moment, it doesn't just change your mood, it changes the inner structure from which you love. First stage, the moment he realizes you're no longer negotiable. Listen carefully, because here a very common fantasy shatters. A man doesn't notice he's losing you when you physically leave. He notices when he can no longer move you internally. It's not a spoken phrase, not an announced boundary, not an emotional scene. It's a silent shift in your inner position, and when it happens, he senses it long before he can explain it in words. Let me make this concrete with a real case. Chris Bell came to counseling with a story that repeats more often than you'd imagine. She was affectionate, deep, committed. She didn't beg, didn't chase, didn't make scenes. From the outside, anyone would say she had dignity, but internally she was silently negotiating. She justified his absences, waited too long, tolerated small inconsistencies so as not to be inconvenient, until something changed, not outside, but inside. And that movement triggered the first real break in his mind. For years, Chris Bell confused patience with mature love. She thought understanding meant giving in, that adapting meant caring. Without realizing it, she taught her inner system and his that her space could expand without breaking. Every long wait, every lukewarm response, every swallowed insult accumulated to form a silent dynamic. There was no malice, but there was no growth either. Because when you adapt too much, the other person never feels the urgency to get themselves together. The break didn't come with a slammed door or streaming tears. It came the day Chris Bell stopped over-explaining herself. Something didn't sit right with her and she stopped justifying it. Something irritated her and she stopped swallowing it. She didn't leave, didn't threaten, didn't complain. She simply stopped betraying herself in the small things. This gesture, as invisible as it was radical, reconfigures everything. Because when you return to yourself, your energy stops asking, stops adapting so the other person won't leave. Here appears the first male mental reaction. It's not fear yet, it's deep discomfort. He doesn't understand what's changed. He only feels that something no longer reacts the same way. Your silence weighs differently. Your boundaries don't sound defensive. Your presence no longer offers itself like before, and this forces him to observe, not to take care of you, but to reposition himself. Because when a woman stops being negotiable without announcing it, the man finds himself facing a new sensation. The dynamic he took for granted is no longer assured. Jung would say that at this point the shadow activates, that part of the psyche that reacts when it loses emotional control, not physical dominance. It's access that matters. He doesn't think, "I'll lose her." He thinks something deeper. "I no longer understand from what position to relate to her." Before, when Chris Bell pulled away, he lost a woman. Now when she pulls away, he loses a comfortable inner position. Because love can be replaced but embodied dignity? No. It's important you see this clearly. This doesn't happen when you leave. It happens when you make 3 inner movements. You stop staying where your body tenses to maintain the relationship. You stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't willing to truly listen to you. You begin to make small decisions that align with you, even if the other person doesn't like them. When you do this, you don't become cold, you become clear. And clarity is profoundly intimidating to someone who is comfortable in your emotional ambiguity. The man starts measuring, observing timing, words, reactions, not because you're manipulating him, but because you've stopped manipulating yourself to make him stay. Here his fantasy breaks. She's always there, always available, and when that certainty falls, his mind goes on alert. It's not love yet, it's recalibration. Because no one appreciates what seems unconditional, but they do appreciate what has silent boundaries. This is the true beginning of psychological respect. Many women believe dignity is hardness. No, dignity is inner coherence maintained over time. Chris Bell didn't become distant, she became integral, and that activated a dangerous question in him. What place do I occupy now? You're no longer a reaction, you're a presence. You no longer chase, you consciously choose. And this constant choice without words disarms every dynamic based on comfort. There's no punishment here, there's structure. And structure orders more than any declaration of love. This stage is silent but irreversible. Because once your system learns it doesn't have to strain to love, it can never go back. He feels it even if he doesn't name it. He knows something has changed, that he can no longer count on your emotional flexibility. This forces him to define himself, grow or withdraw. Both options arise from the same point, your return to yourself. Not from an external threat, but from an inner integrity that's no longer negotiable. I want you to hold this phrase as an anchor because it changes the entire game board. I don't have to leave to stop being negotiable. I have to return to myself. When you integrate that, the bond stops being held together by inertia. The male mind, losing comfort, begins to compare. Not you with the past, but with any other woman who doesn't embody this level of coherence. And there begins something even deeper. In the next stage we'll enter this critical point. Why does your dignity activate more respect than all the love you've given? Because without you realizing it, he starts measuring what he had with you against what he can no longer obtain so easily now. This is the moment when the inner game becomes irreversible and when you stop being a memory. Second stage, why your dignity activates more respect than all the love you've given together. It hurts, but it deeply liberates. Love, when it has no structure, becomes scenery. It's there, it sustains, but it doesn't order anything. What truly reorganizes a man's mind is the inner form from which you love. When you love without abandoning yourself, when you don't shrink to fit, he can no longer read you from comfort. In this silent, steady change weighs more than any emotional promise you made before. The common mistake is believing that giving more love generates more commitment. No, it generates more habit. Dignity, however, introduces a new variable, consequence. Not punishment, not coldness. True coherence. Jung explained that the psyche respects what has contour. When it has clear internal boundaries, the other person perceives that there's something they cannot cross without transforming. And that evokes respect even before desire. Because now he doesn't possess you emotionally, he has to position himself before you as an adult. Here, an unconscious comparison happens. He begins to contrast. He doesn't verbalize it, but he feels it in his body. Your current presence against the past version that always adapted. Your calm against your old waiting. And this contrast generates inner tension. Because before your love was guaranteed, now your access isn't. And when access stops being certain, the male mind enters evaluation, not romantic, strategic. Do I rise or lose this position? This question marks a definitive before and after. Many women believe this is conscious manipulation. No, it's not. Manipulating would mean changing to provoke a reaction. Here you don't change for him. You change for coherence with yourself. And that's felt completely differently. Your energy no longer pushes, doesn't ask, doesn't adapt. It is, and this stable presence without effort disarms more than any speech. Because he can no longer lean on your emotional flexibility to stay the same. Now he has to grow or feel uncomfortable until he leaves. In counseling, this point appears in their confused phrases. I don't know what's happening to me. I perceive her differently. Before it was simpler. Simple isn't love. It's access without consequences. And when that's lost, something new appears. Real attention, not always healthy, not always mature, but finally true attention. Because your dignity forced his system to wake up, not from fear of losing you physically, but from the sensation of losing an inner place that gave him security without effort. Here is where many doubt and step back. When he starts approaching differently, measuring, being more attentive, the temptation to give in again appears. And there everything is decided. Because if you use your dignity as strategy, it dilutes. But if you maintain it as identity, it solidifies. Jung would say this is the moment when the bond stops being projection and becomes conscious choice. And not everyone is ready to choose from there. Your dignity doesn't guarantee he'll stay. It guarantees something more important, that you won't lose yourself. And paradoxically, that's what has the most impact. Because you no longer move from fear of losing him, you move from respect for your inner axis. This emotional autonomy completely changes the balance. He's no longer the evaluator. Now he's the one who has to understand if he can rise to the level of coherence you embody. This respect isn't born from sacrifice, it's born from boundaries. Not from drama, but from maintained calm. When you don't react from the wound but from clarity, he can no longer play at the same level as before. This makes uncomfortable, but it also awakens. Because dignity doesn't seduce like attachment does, but it leaves a trace. A trace that isn't easily erased, not even when the relationship ends. You become the inner reference, not the romantic memory. I want you to see this without idealizing. Some men grow in the face of this, others withdraw. Both results are coherent with who they truly are. What changes is that you no longer negotiate your center to hold on to someone. And when your love is born from there, it stops being a constant offer. It becomes conscious shared choice. This is the difference between being desired and being respected. And the male mind, even if it doesn't admit it, always knows when it's facing the latter. In the next stage will enter an even more delicate and revealing zone. What happens when he starts to feel fear? Not of losing you, but of not being enough to keep you. Their contradictory behaviors appear approaches and withdrawals, silent tests. And if you don't understand this point, you can confuse intensity with authentic love. Third stage, when respect begins to transform into silent fear. It's not the childish fear of losing you, it's the adult fear of not measuring up. Here the male mind enters deep contradiction. He wants to get close, but fears truly exposing himself. He seeks you out and then withdraws, not because he's playing games, but because his identity is reorganizing. Your dignity forces him to look at himself without the cushion of your availability. And this activates an inner anxiety, even if outwardly he shows calm or distance. This fear doesn't express itself with clear words. It appears as ambiguity, lukewarm messages, intense gestures without continuity. He's testing if you're still there, but not from the same place. And when he realizes you don't react like before, that you don't chase or complain like you used to, the unease grows because now he can no longer regulate himself through your emotional reaction. Jung would call this a collision with the true self without masks, and not everyone knows how to bear that inner gaze on themselves. Many women misinterpret this moment. They confuse intensity with progress, believe that intermittent closeness is a sign of emerging love. Not always. Sometimes it's just a system trying to recover lost control. Your task isn't to decode it, but to remain steady. If you don't move from fear, if you don't fill his voids, he finds himself facing something new, his own void. And this encounter can transform him or push him to flee. The important thing is this: listen to it with deep calm. Your dignity doesn't accelerate processes, it reveals them with clarity. If he approaches from genuine presence, you'll feel it. If he approaches from fear, you'll feel that equally. The difference lies in inner stability. Love born from fear needs constant proof. That born from respect seeks connection. And you, by not abandoning your center, become the natural filter that distinguishes one from the other, without saying a single word. At this point, the dynamic has already begun to irreversibly reverse. Before, you were the one measuring times, words, gestures. Now he's doing it. He observes, if you're still available, if something loosens, if you're adapting again. And when you don't, an uncomfortable but profoundly revealing sensation appears. He no longer has you assured, not because you're leaving, but because you're no longer dependent. It's this emotional independence that reorganizes his perception of your real value more than anything. Jung stated that authentic desire arises when the other cannot be possessed, only found. Your dignity removes you from the position of emotional object and returns you to that of conscious subject. And this completely changes the gaze. You're no longer the one who's always there. You're the one who chooses to be there. This difference seems subtle, but it completely transforms the experience of the bond. Because now he no longer relates to your dedication, but to your conscious presence. This is a delicate phase for you too, because if he shows fear or confusion, it can awaken your old role. Reassuring, explaining, supporting. Here it's decided whether your dignity is identity or temporary strategy. If you give energy back to the bond, the system returns to the known. If you maintain yourself, something new installs itself. Not from coldness, but from inner coherence. And this coherence begins to require a clearer position from him. Some men at this point rise. They become more present, more emotionally responsible. Others weaken. Not because you did something wrong, but because the level has risen. And dignity doesn't negotiate the required height. You don't push, don't threaten. You simply don't descend from where you are. And this redefines the bond without direct confrontation. Because true respect isn't imposed, it's embodied. And when it's embodied, it can no longer be ignored or despised. I want you to observe something critically important. When he begins to change, it's not because you convinced him with words. It's because your integrity put him face to face with himself. And when he doesn't change, it's not your failure. It's precious information. Your dignity saves you years of confusion. It shows you who can meet you at the level where you are. It also shows you who could only love you when you made yourself smaller. This clarity hurts at first, but deeply liberates in the long term of your life. In the next stage, we'll enter the point of no return. When he understands, he can no longer return to the version of you that bent. Fourth stage. The moment he understands, there's no return to the previous version. The version of you that waited, that adapted, that gave in to maintain the bond, she doesn't come back. And this certainty doesn't arrive with a conversation. It arrives with an irreversible inner sensation. He can no longer provoke the same reaction in you as before. He can no longer count on your unconditional emotional availability. Something has closed, not from resentment, but from authentic coherence. And when this happens, his mind stops testing. It begins to decide from a deeper place. Here appears a silent mourning. He doesn't cry your physical absence. He mourns the loss of a dynamic that gave him security without effort. And this hurts more than you imagine. Because confronting a woman who doesn't step back obliges him to accept his own limits. Jung defined this point as the death of a projection. You no longer carry his voids. And when the projection falls, only two paths remain. Mature or emotionally withdraw. If he decides to stay, the way he looks at you changes. No longer from comfort, but from conscious respect. He begins to regulate himself, to take emotional responsibility, to measure what he offers, not from fear of losing you, but because he understands he can't keep you from the same level as before. Your dignity has raised the standard without demanding it. This movement redefines the bond. You're no longer refuge, you're encounter. And not everyone knows how to love from there. If he decides to go, even the closure is different. There's no persistent drama, no eternal emotional back and forth. There's a clear sensation of inner boundary. You don't chase explanations, don't try to convince. And this leaves a deep trace. Because even if he leaves, he carries with him an impossible-to-erase reference. That of a woman who didn't negotiate her access for love. This image returns later, when other dynamics no longer suffice. This point is decisive for you. Because here usually appears the corrosive doubt. Was I too rigid? No, you were coherent. And coherence is never excessive hardness. Love that survives only if you make yourself smaller isn't love. It's dependence. Your dignity hasn't destroyed anything precious. It only revealed what couldn't sustain itself at your real level. And even if letting go hurts, something in you begins to rest. There's no more constant tension, no more silent self-abandonment. Jung would say that here begins your true conscious individuation. You no longer define yourself by being chosen by others. You define this energy changes how others approach you, not from emotional demand, but from authentic recognition. Your dignity becomes the natural filter. This stage marks the definitive before and after in your life. It doesn't matter if he comes back or not. You don't return to the version that waited for crumbs. And that's the real gain. Because now you know you don't need intensity to feel real value. You don't need vague promises to stay. Your calm becomes home, a home for yourself. From there, only those who know how to inhabit it without disturbing it can enter. Many men remember this type of woman not with romantic nostalgia, but with deep, belated respect, because she was the one who showed them the limit they couldn't cross. And that limit, far from closing them out, put them face to face with themselves. You didn't teach with discourse, and you taught through embodiment. And that's what remains when everything else dissolves with time. I want you to breathe here, because this isn't a point of hardness. It's a point of calm. You no longer have to sustain the unsustainable. You no longer have to translate yourself to be loved by someone. And your dignity hasn't isolated you. It has ordered you internally. And when you're ordered within, the external begins to respond differently. Not always fast, not always simple, but always more authentic and true. In the next stage, we'll close the complete circle. What happens when you integrate all this as deep identity, not as a reaction to a specific story? How will your way of loving and being chosen consciously be rewritten? There, where you no longer define yourself by who stays, but by what you'll never again allow anyone to do. Fifth stage, when you integrate dignity as identity, not as a response to a wound. Here you no longer act from the past. You act from conscious presence. Your decisions no longer seek a psychological effect. They seek authentic coherence. And this is noticed in every aspect. Your yes has real weight. Your no rests deeply. There's no urgency to define something, because you're already defined from within. This stability changes how others read you, because there are no more emotional cracks through which to enter to negotiate your value. At this point, love stops being a continuous test of value. You no longer need signals to feel secure. Your body is aligned with your boundaries. Your word is coherent with your actions. And this congruence, so simple and so rare, becomes magnetic, not through seduction, but through clarity. Whoever approaches perceives it immediately, and whoever can't sustain it withdraws without noise. Dignity doesn't argue. It orders the inner and outer field. Here something subtle and powerful happens. You begin to notice you no longer hook into vague promises, and you don't hook into intensity without direction or depth. Your system recognizes the difference between authentic presence and emotional spectacle. This saves you time, energy, costly illusions. You don't become demanding. You become emotionally precise. An emotional precision is a language understood only by those who are ready to connect without games. The rest falls away by itself, without shocks or dramas. Jung spoke of integration as the most radical act, to stop fragmenting yourself to please others. This is what you do here. You no longer separate what you feel from what you allow others. You don't negotiate your intuition to maintain a temporary bond. And when someone tries to cross a boundary, your body reacts before your words. There's no anger. There's an elegant withdrawal. And this withdrawal, far from closing the heart, protects it. This is the point where many say, I no longer attract the same type of people. Exactly. Because you no longer transmit from lack. Your dignity completely changes the frequency. You no longer call those who must be held with effort, but those who know how to hold themselves. And this doesn't guarantee quantity of attention. It guarantees real quality. Less noise, more truth. Less fear, more conscious choice. Your love life doesn't simplify because you love less, but because you love yourself better. Here the memory of him loses force. Not because he wasn't important in your journey, but because he no longer occupies the center of your life. The center is you, and from there the past orders itself without resentment. You're grateful for what you learned, and you move forward with confidence. There are no open accounts. There are inner closures. This is true liberation. Not when the other returns, not when he asks forgiveness, but when you no longer need him to be at peace. This change is noticed even in silence. You no longer explain your boundaries. You don't justify your decisions. You simply act in coherence, and this coherence becomes your new normal. Whoever arrives late perceives it. There's no reproach. There's natural distance. Dignity doesn't build walls that wound. It establishes thresholds, and only those who know how to cross them without invading enter. When you look back, you understand something fundamental. You didn't lose love. You gained inner structure. And this structure is the foundation of every healthy bond. Without it, love overflows and wounds. With it, love contains itself and grows. Jung would say that here the bond stops being compensation. It becomes a true encounter. Two emotionally adult people who choose each other, not who desperately need each other. This is the legacy of your dignity. Not changing anyone, but moving yourself to another place, exiting the role of the constant option, and inhabiting that of conscious choice. And from there, everything reorganizes. Your relationships change. Your energy stabilizes. Your decisions become clearer. You no longer chase. You attract authentic presence. You no longer fear losing. You trust in your capacity to choose better. And now, at the closing of this cycle, remember it, because it contains everything that precedes it. Your dignity doesn't distance you from love. It brings you to the right one. It doesn't make you inaccessible. It makes you authentic. And when you're authentic, love stops being a struggle. It becomes a home. From here, you don't turn back, because you no longer seek to be chosen. You choose yourself. Sixth stage, when everything reconfigures from within your essence. You no longer act from emotional reaction. You act from conscious identity. This is the point where dignity stops being an abstract concept. It becomes your natural way of being in the world. You don't ask yourself what to do for the other to stay. You ask yourself if that bond honors what you are now. And this silent question guides every decision. There's no urgency. There's no fear. There's a steady calm that's no longer negotiable. Here's something profoundly transformative happens. Your nervous system learns that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with authentic connection. You don't confuse sacrifice with true commitment. Your body recognizes when something is healthy and when it's not. And this inner intelligence saves infinite exhausting explanations. You don't have to close cycles with long words. You close them with coherence. And that coherence is felt even in your silence, even when you say nothing. Many men don't forget a woman like this, not because she was perfect in all aspects, but because she was integral, because she didn't betray herself to be chosen, because she showed without speaking what someone who truly respects themselves looks like. Jung said that what isn't integrated repeats infinitely, and you've broken the repetition. So you've become an inner reference point for those who've known you. Not everyone recognizes it right away, but everyone remembers it. This is the point where love stops being a psychological game. There are no more tests to pass, no more strategies, no more roles to maintain. There's conscious presence. There's reciprocal choice. And if there isn't, there's still peace, because your value no longer depends on being desired, but on being faithful to yourself. This inner fidelity is the foundation of every bond worth living. Without it, everything is constantly negotiated. With it, everything naturally orders itself. I want you to hear this with gentleness. Not everyone can love you from this level, and that's not a loss for you. It's a natural purification. Your dignity doesn't exclude from hardness. It filters intelligently. It lets in those who can sustain a relationship without depending on your self-sacrifice. And even if the path becomes more selective, it also becomes lighter, less inner noise, less emotional confusion, more pure truth. When you integrate all this, you no longer look back with guilt, but with deep understanding. You understand why you gave in, why you waited, why you adapted, and you also understand why you can't anymore. Not because you're hard, but because you've grown. And growing means letting go of old versions of yourself. This too is real self-esteem, one that doesn't have to prove itself, only sustain itself daily. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the most courageous act of the human being, becoming what you truly are, even if it means losing bonds that existed only through dependence. You've walked this path. And so you've changed the way you love, the way you choose, the way you let yourself be chosen. You no longer seek to complete yourself through the other. You share from your fullness. This is love that doesn't consume itself. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey. Leave a like to tell me this content reaches you deeply. Write in the comments which part touched you most. That way YouTube understands we need to grow this space together. Because when we share from genuine truth, YouTube favors what we choose together. And this type of reflection only reaches those who are ready to truly hear it. Don't forget this when you close the video. Your dignity isn't a barrier that wounds, it's a lighthouse. It doesn't chase love away. It guides it consciously. And whoever comes toward you from now on will come knowing they can't take you for granted. But they can find you through conscious choice. This is the difference between a bond that consumes and one that sustains. Today you don't leave with manipulative techniques, but with an embodied truth. You don't have to prove your value. You don't have to convince someone to stay. Your simple, aligned, and steady presence already says everything. As a final reminder, integrate it in one phrase. A phrase that will accompany you from now on, because it defines your new place in the world. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love. This phrase contains everything we've explored together. It's not a threat. It's a declaration of integrity. It's not a promise to someone else. It's a reality embodied in you. And when you carry it within, the world around begins to reorganize. Not because you force it, but because your energy communicates a truth that can no longer be ignored. Your dignity isn't a choice. It's a natural consequence of who has decided never to betray themselves again. Remember that this journey isn't linear like a straight highway. There will be moments when doubts and perplexities return. There will be moments when you feel the force of this truth flowing within like a deep certainty. Both are integral parts of the process. Dignity isn't a final destination. It's a daily practice of coherence with yourself. Every time you choose not to compromise your value. Every time you maintain your boundaries, even when it hurts terribly. Every time you listen to your intuition instead of fear. You're building an inner structure that no one will ever be able to shake. And when this structure is solid as rock, the love that arrives isn't the one that consumes and wounds you. It's the one that authentically sustains you. It's not the one that asks you to become smaller and invisible. It's the one that sees you in your fullness and consciously chooses to be there. This is the love that deserves a woman who has truly learned to respect herself. This is the love born when dignity becomes the foundation of everything. So as you close this video, carry with you this liberating truth. You're not here to be chosen at any price by the first comers. You're here to consciously choose. You're not here to adapt to dynamics that don't honor you. You're here to create spaces where only authentic love can dwell. And when you do that, when you embody this dignity not as a weapon, but as profound truth, the world around you begins to change. Not because you force it with manipulations, but because your energy communicates a completely different frequency. This is the true magic of dignity. It's not manipulation. It's authentic magnetism. It's not hardness that wounds. It's crystal clarity. And when you carry it within you, you attract people who know how to truly recognize it. People who are ready to be at your level. People who don't need to keep you small to feel big. This is the gift this video leaves you. Not a technique to change someone, but a truth to truly transform yourself. And when yourself is profoundly transformed, everything else follows naturally. Thank you for listening to the end with openness. This space exists for you, for your most intimate reflections, for your conscious journey toward authentic integrity, and continue choosing yourself every day. Continue honoring your boundaries even when it's difficult. Continue embodying the dignity you truly deserve. And always remember this truth you'll carry forward. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love.